Hello, my name is Dr. Rava Zolnikov, and I am a professor at National University in the Community Health Department. I recently took a trip to Brazil and worked on a World Health Organization grant. And with this grant, we were working with waste pickers, and we were trying to determine the association and exposure to vector-borne diseases within this population. So because I'm a qualitative researcher, I wanted to hear from the population, which was a waste picker. This is a group of people, again, that sorts through garbage, open air garbage, to find recyclable material to exchange for money. What we were looking for specifically was, in this population, they had recently implemented a triage center, so waste pickers no longer had to work on the streets. This was in Brazil. And what we found was that, well, the results are inconclusive right now, but what we found was that waste pickers were still being exposed to vector-borne diseases. And some of these can be Chagas, malaria, leishmaniasis, and more. So interestingly enough, the intervention where Brazil took the target population and gave them a better scenario, a better working environment, it still contributed to vector-borne diseases. So the results are, we're still working and processing, but those are the initial results from that project. This project shaped my focus on research specifically because it was interesting to hear from the population. We think that when we implement interventions, that we're doing something that is better for the population, right? So for example, sometimes we give a population water, sometimes we give them a better working environment, sometimes we give them really a bed net to sleep under for malaria, any one of those things. We think it's improving their outcome, and it surely can. But what we forget sometimes is that you have to understand if this is really going to fit in with that target population. So interestingly enough, with this research, we found that even though we were providing a better environment for waste pickers, they were still being exposed to vectors, which is not that amazing to think about, because there is still garbage that they're processing and sorting through. So this was not shocking information to me. What we think, though, is that maybe perhaps the exposure has decreased. So that's something that my counterparts on this grant were working on, actually collecting vectors and classifying them and seeing if they were carrying any of the diseases. What we heard from when we conducted this research was that waste pickers, they did believe that their scenario had improved, and their environment had improved. And this was great to hear. But what we also learned was that they were not making as much money. So if you can think about it like this, someone's going to give you a job, and it's going to be in a better environment. You won't be exposed to the sun as much. You won't, you'll have things processed and sorted for you. It's just easier. There's like a conveyor belt of trash that comes, so you can kind of sort through it and pick through it. But you are going to make less money. And this is an already vulnerable population that suffers from poverty. So it's approximately, when they were working in the open pit mine, they were making around $400 a month. And now they're making around $200, sometimes $300. In their voice, what they told me was that they wished that they could go back, some of them. They could go back to the worst condition so that they could make more money. That's something that you would only really hear or learn about with qualitative research. And I think that's why it makes that research so special, because you're looking at a situation from a different perspective, one that you're not necessarily honed in on. So we were only focused on, the Brazilian government was only focused on the exposures of the waste pickers. And they forgot to ask about if they were making as much money in this other more safe working environment. And the answer is that they were not. So that's something that the majority of all my participants really brought up and highlighted.